Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. I am sure by now many Oregon fans who follow this program pretty damn closely have seen the news around Evan Stewart. And I want to be very clear right off the bat. And many of y'all know this. I ain't no insider. I'm just sitting here in my basement talking about some legitimate buzz that we've seen over the last 12 hours. And when I first started seeing the buzz on Thursday afternoon, I was like, we are far away from actually having this conversation until it gets reported by a lot more people. You sit here Friday morning and it sounds like there's a lot of smoke here. In Oregon, it sounds like they need to be prepared to play in 2025 without Evan Stewart, whether it's the entire season in 2025, whether it's a good chunk of 2025. It sounds like Oregon needs to be ready to play without Evan Stewart. Now, I want to start with this thoughts and prayers to Evan Stewart. I think he has some talent at the wide receiver position that not a lot of other college football players across the country can match. And I think many of the Oregon fans know this. I was looking at the 2025 year and I thought, massive year for Evan Stewart, right? Dante Moore coming in and taking over the offense, his ability to attack the boundary, push the ball vertically downfield. I thought this was going to be a monster year for Evan Stewart. Now we need to have the conversation about who needs to step up in this Oregon wide receiver for Oregon to still be that college football playoff team, that national championship contending team that we know they can be in the 2025 year. I'll start with this. If there is a position where if you were an Oregon fan and you knew you were going to have to suffer an injury at, and you got to choose what position it was going to be, you'd probably choose wide receiver. That is the deepest and most talented position room on this team, maybe outside of cornerback, just because of the pure numbers that we think can play in that cornerback room. I look at Oregon's wide receiver room and say the whole conversation that we had during spring was, how are you going to get all these good football players on the field in 2025? Well, now they're going to need to get on the football field with Evan Stewart missing some significant time with injury. I'm going to talk about who we think is going to step up for Oregon. And it's a couple of different conversations. It's one, hey, who's going to be that true wide receiver one in this offense? Because I think a lot of Oregon fans expected that to be Evan Stewart, but also from a depth standpoint. You need some other guys to kind of fill in, and you might say like a group effort in terms of replacing the production that Evan Stewart was going to give you. Now, before we get into it, as always, to the Oregon fans, that this episode obviously less fun to do, considering I think we were all really excited about Eastu and what he could do in 2025. Let it fly in the comment section. I think the first conversation we're going to start is who's going to be the wide receiver one, who's going to be the guy that's commanding the most amount of targets in this offense in 2025. I got to take. I'm guessing many Oregon fans have the same player in mind. Please let it fly in the comment section. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Sorry about the sniffles. I am battling, whether it's a cold, whether it's some allergies. The nose is working overtime right now, but I'll try to have that be the last one. Who's going to be the wide receiver one? I think that's the conversation you want to start with, and I think many of us think the same thing. Dorian Moore has to be the guy. I think there were a lot of Oregon fans, and I was kind of starting to subscribe to this idea as well, that even with Evan Stewart playing for Oregon in the 2025 year, I thought Dorian Moore had a great shot at being that wide receiver one. Now he's going to need to be. And I think what's so special about Dorian Moore, and we've talked about it at length, is this kid he's not just this one-dimensional true freshman wide receiver that only does one thing well. He's a guy that you can get involved in the offense in so many different ways, and you can move him around the football field. And I don't love to make comps to a guy like Jeremiah Smith, because Jeremiah Smith is just, in my opinion, I haven't seen a true freshman wide receiver play like that in a very long time, arguably in my life. Similar to Ohio State, building that offense and a passing attack around Jeremiah Smith, moving him from the slot to the boundary, asking him to do all sorts of things. Although Dorian Moore is a different kind of football player, you can ask Dorian Moore to do all those same things too. Dorian Moore is a 10-4 guy that has elite ball skills. So you can ask him to work vertically down the field. He can be the wide receiver that can take the top off a defense that we expected Evan Stewart to be in the 2025 year. But at the same time, Dorian Moore into the movement skills, the route running ability, the short area quicks, his ability to separate. He can be that all purpose wide receiver that works the middle, that works the intermediate route concepts. And I think arguably the most exciting aspect of his game is what he does with the football in his hands, which is a perfect fit in the Will Stein offense. That's a speed and space, yards after the catch offense. I look at it and say, all right, Dorian Moore, we're going to put a lot of expectations on this kid. He's going to have to be the wide receiver one, at least in my opinion, for Oregon in the 2025 year. Now, the good news is I think this kid is very capable coming out of high school, and everything we heard from him in spring practice was he has the ability to be a wide receiver one immediately as a freshman. The next pass catcher you have to talk about, and it's a little bit of a different conversation, probably not many people having this conversation, but I think it's important, is Kenyon Sadiq. To me, is going to be the pass catcher two in this offense. And many of y'all know how I feel about Kenyon Sadiq. I think he is going to be the best tight end in the country in the 2025 year. Very similar to these other elite tight ends that you see teams run their passing attacks through. Kenyon Sadiq is this, I also don't want to call him a tight end, just like an offensive weapon. And you heard about how they were talking about this kid in the spring. We're going to try to get him 80 plus touches in this 2025 season. And I don't blame you. You can put him in line. You can put him in the backfield at the H-back. You can split him out wide, and he can give you legitimate pass-catching juice as a jumbo slot wide receiver. Oregon's very lucky to have a tight end that there are so many just solid tight ends that are going to do what you ask them to do and move the chains on third downs. There's not many tight ends that can be difference makers in the passing attack. To me, Kenyon Sadiq can be that guy. And now all of a sudden in 2025, he needs to be that guy because there's a very good chance they need him to be the pass catcher too in this Oregon offense. Who's up next? And this kind of gets into probably the biggest concern with the injury to Evan Stewart is there's not a ton of proven production in the room. Although we think it's an extremely talented room, who's been the most productive wide receiver that's going to be healthy to start 2025, assuming this Evan Stewart stuff is true? Gary Bryant, and I think number 2 would be Justice Lowe. And so although the proven production is not necessarily there in this room, there are so many different guys that we all think have the ability to come in and be legitimate dudes. I think there's guys in the 3 deep of this Oregon offense. And many of you know I'm a Michigan fan. There are guys in the 3 deep of this Oregon offense that would probably come to Michigan and have a chance to be the wide receiver one. And so who's it going to be? Let's talk about that X boundary wide receiver. I think you got 3 names to monitor here. You got Kyle Casper, Jurion Dickey, and Malik Benson. Malik Benson, to me, is a guy that is going to play a role in this Oregon offense, especially with the big body that can absolutely cook. Like Malik Benson is another 10-4 guy in the 100-meter dash. He's 6'1", 200 pounds, 10-4 in a straight line. And so he's a guy that you can bring in if you want to attack vertically down the field because that's what Malik Benson is best at. Look at Kyle Casper and say he's that matchup nightmare kind of guy. You know, a guy that when you get into the red zone or you want to throw 50-50 balls to or work the back shoulders, there's not many guys that can deal with the catch radius that Kyle Casper can bring. And you look at Jurion Dickey and say, is this the year for him? And with the Evan Stewart news, it kind of has to be because when you ask me, all right, who has the potential to be the most well-rounded X boundary wide receiver on this football team, I look at it and say it's Jurion Dickey. I like Kyle Casper and I like Malik Benson. And I like the specific traits and abilities that they bring to this Oregon offense. But if you're looking for a guy similar to Evan Stewart that can kind of do it all, work vertically down the field, separating the intermediate route trees, to me, it's got to be Jurion Dickey. And so now all of a sudden, this is the year, and has been one of the biggest talking points around this Oregon team rolling into 2025 is there's so much talent on this roster. There's so much young talents that going into year 2 or going into year 3, if Oregon's going to win a national championship, which I think is very real, I almost think that they have a better chance of doing it this year than they did last year because the ceiling that this Oregon team can reach if it all comes together, I think is a better ceiling than what they had last year. You need a guy like Jurion Dickey to be a guy, to be a potential starting wide receiver that can command 8 to 10 targets a game. I think Dorian Moore probably leads this team in targets. I think Kenyon Sadiq is probably number 2 in this team in targets. If you're asking me who can be the third, the pass catcher 3 in this offense, if Oregon's going to play their best football, my pick would probably be Jurion Dickey. And I know we haven't seen a ton from this kid. He's finally healthy. He's going into year 3. Can it be his year? Another guy that I think is really important now is Gary Bryant Jr. I think he can play. And again, we've seen him play at a high level, and now he's kind of the elder statesman in this room. He's probably the I think he is. I should have looked this up, but I think he is the most productive wide receiver on this roster right now in terms of college football production he's produced. He's probably got to have a big year too. Dylan Gresham, Jeremiah McClellan. You've heard really good things from Cooper Perry, kind of flying under the radar because you have another true freshman, Dorian Moore, who's a guy. I guess we'll say this, there are some other positions that if you lost one of your best players, it'd be really concerning. Excuse me. For example, if this news was around Isaiah World, that left tackle, it'd be a little concerning. I mean, maybe you can count on a guy like Janoris Wilson to come in and start, but the tackle position you probably want to stay healthy in. I do look at the wide receiver and say, look, if there was a position where you feel like Oregon has enough depth to deal with an injury or two, it's probably a wide receiver. They got guys who can step up. This is the year they got to make it happen. We'll close it out there. I'd love to hear who you think is going to be the wide receiver 1 in this offense. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. I'm sorry that I don't mean to be dour. You know what I mean? It's just it sucks. I think we're all really excited to see this kid play in 2025. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.